Hi everybody, so welcome to the channel, which is first and foremost a way to share with you the most compelling period pieces that I encounter, such as this really one-of-a-kind set from Upper Normandy dating to about 300 or 320 years ago. And now you'll see that these videos tend to focus on furniture which is decorative art from the key timeline in furniture history of about the year 1500 to 1840. And these period pieces really differ in every way from what we normally qualify as an antique. But today I hope that you'll really enjoy taking a closer look at two of the most striking and exceptional provincial pieces that I think we could hope to discover. And so these pieces take us back to the year 1700, when dentists didn't exist and when eggs were considered caviar, but when moreover 90% of the French population lived in the countryside. And so provincial pieces, especially these exceptional provincial pieces, are perhaps a more poignant trace of the reality of life at this time than the more iconic Parisian pieces, which have of course long since earned their front row seat in art history. And so the first thing that we notice here is that we have a set. We have a two-tiered presentation cabinet, sometimes referred to as a two-tiered buffet, and then we have a matching armoire, which is itself a type of presentation cabinet. And then the next thing that really strikes us is this very diverse and sophisticated decor, which is nevertheless coupled with a quality of execution that is decidedly a little rustic. And so normally we wouldn't see such an elaborate decor on pieces which are this provincial. This type of decor is normally more associated with provincial pieces that are actually categorized as regional masterpieces from much more sought after and recognizable workshops in large major cities of a given region. And so these pieces begin as quite eccentric and they become more unusual the more we look at them. And so we do see decorative motifs from about the year 1700, but the overall decor here is truly one of a kind. And we can start with these really striking starburst motifs which symbolize celebration. And here on the two-tiered buffet, we actually have 4 16-pointed stars, 2 convex and 2 concave, which surround a quadrilobe motif, which itself surrounds a flower on a checkered background. And so then if we look above and below this emblem, we'll notice some hearts sculpted into the panels. And then here where the doors close, the moldings of these panels form an upside-down heart above a heart which is right side up, which itself contains a heart-shaped key escutcheon. And then we can take a look at some of the sculpted flowers here, which are repeated on the doors of the armoire. And then again, we see these hearts on the armoire repeated as well. So we have celebratory starbursts. We're celebrating something that involves hearts, and there were flowers present. So in all likelihood, these pieces were commissioned as a wedding gift for a young couple commemorating their wedding in their new home 300 years ago. And so this would have been a little bit easier to recognize later on in the 18th century, when this type of wedding furniture would often be adorned with a cartouche that would be sculpted with the initials of the young couple. But here, these two pieces actually predate the use of this monogram, but we nevertheless see that this unique decor is the result of how these were custom ordered for a specific occasion, and wedding furniture is famous, if not a little notorious among collectors, for having unique decor which is a little hard to place because it is the reflection of the specific preferences of a single person at a single point in time. Now, in terms of dating these two pieces to around the year 1700, we see elements of their design, their form, and their decor which belong to both the 17th and the 18th centuries. And that's why we categorize them as being from about the year 1700, because they present the traits of pieces which are actually transitioning between these two centuries. The backs of the pieces, furthermore, are oxidized and are left unfinished, and so they're much more to the tune of early 18th century furniture than, let's say, 19th century furniture. If we look at the rectangular frames of these pieces, we see that the overall form here and the architecture is more tethered to 17th century furniture design, especially with regard to the square feet and the flat cornices, which will actually become curved early on into the 18th century. But here on the doors of the buffet, we notice with this particularly scrolling and curvilinear panel that the piece is nevertheless announcing the curvilinear styles of the 18th century. And furthermore, the motifs that we see on the bottom doors of the armoire, this quadrilobe, which is centered by a Maltese cross or an 8-pointed star, it's repeated on the two-tiered buffet. And these are two motifs which are associated with late 17th century furniture ornamentation. And then this curvilinear niche here is something that we see featured on a lot of late Louis XIV period provincial furniture, circa 1700. So next, in terms of linking these pieces to the specific region of Normandy, the next thing we notice here is that much of the wood used for the construction is actually oak. Now the panels have been done in a fruit wood, which seems to lend itself better to carving, but the rest of the pieces are in this porous oak. Now oak is a wood which is typically associated with medieval furniture production, but it sees prolonged use in Normandy, especially during the glory days of Norman furniture production, where we're going to see elaborately carved armoires from various key cities in the region of Normandy, which are in fact made out of oak. And then the next thing that we might consider is the use of this Gothic linen fold motif here on the sides of these pieces. And now this is a motif which symbolizes the folded altar cloth, and it's very much associated with Gothic decor and ornamentation of the 15th century. But just as the Normans seem to prolong the use of this favorite medieval furniture wood, oak, Normandy is a region where we see prolonged use of the Gothic linen fold motif even up into the early 18th century, the period from which these two pieces likely date. The next thing we could consider is the checkering, which is pretty heavily featured on both pieces, and this is an element of decor that we see occurring on a lot of provincial pieces in the region of Brittany as well as in Normandy. And then we could continue to take a look at the shells, which are sculpted in the corner panels of the sides of the buffet, kind of evoking proximity to the sea. And then finally, if we take a quick trip to the Museum of Norman History and Arts, the Château de Martinville, we can look at a much more prototypical and recognizably Norman piece, a four-doored, two-tiered armoire or buffet from about the year 1700. And now this piece is also in oak. It is from a much more recognizable and sought-after workshop because we see various examples of this exact piece in books and in the museum and even on the market. But take a look at the peculiar panel on the four doors. Now this panel is something surrounded by sculpture, but we refer to it as being in the form of a chapel. And so if we take a look at the sides of this piece, we'll notice that same panel shape in the form of a chapel, which is sort of linked to Norman furniture production, and it's also a good indicator of something that's common around the year 1700. Okay, so finally, even though this is lapsing into Sherlock Holmes territory, I did find these pieces at a Norman estate where they were owned by art collectors who used them to display a really astounding collection of porcelain from the 17th century. Well, stoneware, porcelain from the 18th century. And so if we move inside of the pieces, we'll notice something else that's rather peculiar here, which is at first all of my clutter, but also we're going to take a look at this lock which has 4 bolts and which also features a trefoil key, the hollow column of which is in the shape of a club from the house of cards. And now this is a key that occurs throughout the 17th century and the 18th century, but it's really more associated with luxury Parisian furniture of the early 19th and late 18th centuries. I have never seen such a key on an armoire, and I would never have expected to find one on a provincial armoire. And also, while we're inside the piece, we can see that true to the provincial nature of this piece, despite its beautiful decor, we see that the inner panels have been left unfinished. Some of the more regional masterpieces that we've discussed are generally finished on the insides, but this is a particularly charming thing for us to notice. We can see some of the hinges, the nails, and the apparent doweling. And then also inside, we'll notice an old train sticker label because this piece apparently arrived into the train station of the city of Tours at some point. Now the same is true inside the 2-tiered 4-door buffet here, where we're going to see that the inner panels of these doors are left highly unfinished. And so for a piece of this decorative caliber, like I said, we might expect to see the inner panels of the piece finished, just to add a little bit of refinement that might be a little bit more coherent with the overall decorative impact of the pieces. So all in all, I hope that you've enjoyed taking a closer look at these remarkable traces of early Norman furniture, which really do fall outside of the normal repertoire of this type of regional furniture that some of us are very familiar with. and I was very much intent on preserving a digital trace of them online for everyone to see. So if you'd like to support that endeavor, please like the videos and subscribe to the channel. But in any case, part of what makes these so peculiar is what makes them so memorable for us now today. That these are in fact remarkable examples of provincial furniture where we see the artistic potential of a small, forgotten workshop being pushed to its limits to commemorate someone's wedding 320 years ago.